It was a pretty good hunt. I generally don't hunt Maine that often, right? I just
Okay.
haven't had the time. Usually, when snow starts to fall in Vermont, usually I've got a buck in Vermont or New Hampshire or both. Um, and I just don't have the time. And recently, since business has evolved, I've been able to escape a little bit more. Regardless, I went over to this area that I'd hunted last year one day, saw two buck, passed them up, both small ones. I went over there for a half a day this year. It was bare ground, and I'd found a signpost over there last year, two of them together, hammered on. I went over there during rifle season. It was bare ground, hiked up, set a camera on those signpost trees, and I think it was the 19th of November when I was in there. So I was late. Like, I wanted to hang it in there the first end of October, 1st of November. I just never had the time, never made it over. So I ended up having to come home that day after I set the camera up. My wife needed something done with the kid or whatever. So headed home. I didn't go back over. Maine got a little bit of snow, and it turned to shit. It froze. It got wet. It froze. It was crunchy, and it was coming right down to the wire. It was the last day in their kind of western zone. I forget what zone it is. Maybe 12.
Yep.
And it was supposed to rain. Open it up, Isaac. Just open it
I'm
up.
trying to be quiet.
Bud Light.
Try to be
Just
quiet.
open it up. Yeah, last day of Maine, and it was supposed to rain. And I didn't have a muzzleloader tag. It was 10 o'clock at night. I was like sitting there contemplating with my wife. I was like, do I buy it? Do I not buy it? Do I buy it? Not buy it? She's like, if you don't buy it, you're just going to kick yourself in the ass.
Mhm.
So I bought it.
Yeah.
Drove over there, and unbeknownst to me, there was a little skittering of snow from the night before. And it was softening. It was going to soften up quickly. The snow was going to be gone by the end of the day. It was the last day of muzzleloader. I cut a buck track. I was driving up this log road that I knew, and I cut a buck track. He was crossing the road, and there's a huge river off to my left that's probably 300-400 yards away, and he was going across the river. The best of my knowledge, it was dark. I didn't follow him, but that's the way he was headed. And there's only one way across this river. You're not going to swim this baby. So I went up, parked the truck, get out of the truck, and here's this buck track with blood in it. And I was like,
So you just happened to pull the truck over.
pull the truck
Right
in where there's the only spot possible to cross the river.
Mm-hmm.
And here's this buck track with a little bit of blood in it. And my first thought is, oh man, somebody got into one. I got away from them. This isn't an area that gets a lot of snow, so it's easy in huge mountains.
Mm-hmm.
This is an area that is, if it's bare ground, it's very easy for one to get away from somebody if they didn't make a good shot on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my first thought, right? Like, you see blood in a track, usually, shit.
Somebody
So
hit
either
it in the leg.
Yeah, somebody
Yeah.
either hit it in the leg or he got to fighting or
Yeah.
something like that. He's wounded one way or another. And so I get onto his track, crosses a river, proceeds down the river, and we come into an area on this edge of this log road that is all torn up. And I'm like, wow, what took place here? It looked like he fed. At first, I thought it was two buck that fought. There was tracks everywhere. And I could see blood. And then I got to looking, and I could see a little piece of hide, like a 6-8 inch piece of hide from a deer laying there. And I was like, what the hell? I got to looking around, and I could see where these coyotes, there was like 4 of them, that came right on to where he was feeding, is what it was. He was feeding. And they got onto him. He obviously got into a tussle with them and got away. And at that point in time, I was probably a mile from the river, and he was headed that direction. And there's maybe 2 inches of snow at best. And I start going down through, and I should mention his track was probably 24 to 36 hours old, right?
Okay.
They had got snow the previous day, just a skittering. right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could just faintly see the blood underneath the snow, like you would when blood
Yep.
starts to melt. When the snow starts to melt, blood expands.
Yep.
Right? It looks like it's way more there than what there is.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see in the snow every so often, like every 10 to 20 yards, he'd drop of blood. And I just went that direction. The coyotes were right on his ass. You couldn't hardly see his deer track. You could just see the faint blood in areas. And I come down over the bank and I could see this coyote coming up through. I was like, I could hear it. I stepped over the bank and I could see it. It was a coyote. And I didn't shoot the coyote because generally when I'm deer hunting, I don't shoot anything but the deer that I'm going to shoot.
I don't either. I get a lot of crap for it too.
Yep, I just
a lot
don't,
of people give me crap for that.
Yep, I don't
either.
need to let that deer know
Yep.
that I'm any closer to him than he needs to know,
Mhm.
right? So we're going down to the river, and he gets down on the river, and there's ice on either side of the river, and there is coyote tracks everywhere, and this buck's going right out into the river, and I'm like, oh man, this buck's met his demise, and I videoed this whole thing. And this river is waist to chest high, right? And it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not looking to get wet. And I figure the buck is dead, like dead to rights. Coyotes, there's tracks coming both ways across that ice, and I could see out into the middle of the river there was a rock with ice on it, and some snow, and you could see that there was blood on that rock on the ice. And I said right in the video, I was like, I don't know if it was a coyote that got up onto that rock after he, been chowing down on that deer and had blood on his fur and just rested for a second, then swam back across, or maybe it was the deer that got up on top of that rock. I don't know. But regardless, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to find out. So I proceed down the river to try and find that buck track that I'd cut earlier in the morning. Get onto the buck track, follow him up on the mountain. He goes through a pile of stuff, and I kick him up, and he was just, I could tell instantly he was nothing that I wanted to kill. I come all the way back down to the signpost tree, the camera that I had set, grab the camera, go to the truck. I'd marked where that deer crossed that river on my Onyx. Drove down the road, left the gun in the truck, because it's only 300 yards from the road, and it's nowhere that I want to, the river to the road from where I left him is like 300 yards, and it's nowhere I want to kill him. Right? Even if he's alive, I'm just not going to shoot that close to the road.
Yep.
So I just book it down through the woods, just right down to where he was. I get down there, and I could see where the deer came up out of the water, stood around on the shore, bedded down, went over a little bit, bedded down again, climbed up on the bank, jumped off the bank into the river that had fresh ice on it, and going back across the river. And I was like, son of a bitch. I just booted that deer back across that river.
Mm-hmm.
So what that deer had done was he'd swam that river. He'd got out onto that rock where those coyotes couldn't get to him, right? Because the water's moving.
Yeah.
Coyotes couldn't get to him. They left him alone. He got on the other side of the river and just bedded right next to it because he knew that if they came across the river, he's just going to jump right back into it where they couldn't get him. Mm-hmm. That was his defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here I am. I come across. I push him back across that river. I never saw him go. I was like a freight train walking through the woods. I get in the truck. I drive all the way back up, hike all the way back down the river, like another mile or so. Get on his track, and he comes up out of that river, and he's running. And I'm just like taking 3-footers, just trying to catch him. And it's getting later in the day. It was like 2-3 o'clock. Not quite 3 o'clock. It was close. It was close to it. And he starts walking, and he starts checking signpost trees, and he's just paralleling the river, walking. And he wasn't bleeding that bad. He was only bleeding, every 10, 20 yards he'd drop a thing of blood. Keep in mind, he just came out of the river, so his hair's soaking wet. If he's got blood on him, it's going to drip off. And we get down into a section, it was a section of hemlocks, and I come up over this little rise and I jump him, and he goes down into the ridge, and I ran right to the top of the ridge where he's coming up out. And when he crested the top of it, I thought he was going to go parallel to me, and I was just waiting for him to touch the top, and I was going to touch one off. And he turned, went straight away from me, and I shot, and I never touched him. I loaded up, went screaming across that ravine, got up on there. He went across this side hill that was super steep. It was more ice than anything. I fell on that gun probably harder than I've ever fallen on another gun. Right on the scope. Holding on to the tree. It was 50 yards of the river straight down, and I was like, this scope is screwed. Get back on his track, and I'm booking it at this point. And it's like 3:30 at this time, and it's starting to get dark, right? And I'm booking it down through, and he's still parallel on the river. And I caught up with him probably 3/4 of a mile later, jumped him in the hardwoods. He was running broadside, shot him, loaded up again, got over there, saw I hit him. He runs across that river, right? And luckily where he crossed that river, it had forked, it split. So it was only knee deep at this point. Got across that river, and there he lay.
No kidding.
Wow.
Deader than a doornail. And those, so long story short, those coyotes had ripped like an 8-10 inch piece of hide right off his back leg. It was raw meat exposed. But the blood in his track was from a ripped dew claw. His dew claw was just as polished down as could be.
Right.
And it's from running those rocks, the best I could tell, up in those ridges. Just worn right down. That was what, either they could sense that blood, and that's why they said.
That's why they were keying in on him. Yeah.
Yep. Or he was just so rotted out that it was just, they just had his number. They were going to kill him. It was only a matter of time.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yep.
I was going to say, if you didn't, would they have?
They would have.
I definitely think they would have eventually killed him. Whether it was a couple days later, a couple weeks later.
Mother Nature is cruel, ain't she?
Oh yeah.
Because that's not a very good death.
No.
Your bullet's a lot nicer than
Yep.
than that.
So, that being said, that year before, when I hunted that deer, or when I hunted that area, I came across a trail that was crossing the river, and I had a camera in the truck, and the truck wasn't very far away from where they were crossing. I hiked back in there and set a camera up on that trail. He was the only buck I had photos of, and that was the buck that I killed.
No kidding.
Yep.
That's great. That was a heavy horned buck too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good
it was wicked mass.
palmation on him, yeah.
Yep.
Big
Yeah.
A's and
And
eight.
he was an 8. Yeah, and I thought he was a young deer
Mhm.
with a lot of potential. And he actually had gone downhill.
Oh, no kidding.
He'd actually gone the other way.
You had him aged, or you just look at his teeth? They're
Just
all
as
worn
well,
out?
he went downhill with his antlers.
Oh,
He had a
yeah.
split
First
G2 the
song.
year before, and it was just webbed looking thing
Okay.
this year.
And what did he weigh?
He weighed 209, December 11th. Yeah.
So that's a hog.
Mature
Big old
Maine
hog ski.
buck.
What do you think he weighs first day rifle season?
I would bet every bit north of 250, I
Woo.
would say.
Was he long? And
He had it all.
Yeah, he had
Long
it
tall.
all.
And you
Yeah,
said he was
long.
in big mountains.
He was in big mountains.
Isn't that something? You know, I hear a lot of times guys say, oh, big mountains, the deer don't get as heavy because they're running up and down them. Sometimes I think that's just baloney.
It is baloney.
Yeah.
I can tell you that most of my damage comes from 2,600 feet and above.
Yep.
That's just
That's where the big ones.
Those
That's
were
where
those
the
big
big
ones
ones
that-
are.
They get
Yeah.
away from everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we've talked about that a lot in some last episodes.
Yes, we have. Like Lanny Benoit said, his biggest buck came off of Katahdin, and that's the
Yeah.
biggest that's the biggest mountain in Maine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I don't want to give a whole ton of secrets away, but
Yeah.
yeah,
generally the biggest mountains in the area have the biggest deer.
yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure, yeah. Because
it's-
people can't get at them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what it boils down to.
Yeah.
And we can say this kind of stuff because people still won't go there.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a certain kind.
determination.
It takes
definitely
a certain
a
kind
certain
of person to get them.
Yeah.
Yep, that's for sure.
And if you want to see the pictures of that deer's foot in the rack and stuff, that's on the Northwoods page, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
you
that
guys
picture
can.
you posted of
Yeah.
his dew claw ripped off. That was crazy.
Yeah,
'Cause
Yep.
on the other side too, wasn't the other one?
the other
cracked
was
as well?
starting to get that same way. Yeah, you would have never thought that was what was causing that blood.
And
I
they just
never
picked it
would've
up.
thought
Those coyotes.
Yeah,
Wow,
they
that's
had his
crazy.
number.
Just a big old mountain buck.
Yep.
Run them right off. I'm sure you think of how many miles that buck did over the season. You
Yeah.
got him December, what was it, 11th? You said?
Yeah, December 11th. Yeah,
Wore him right off.
Okay.
yeah, and it's surrounded by 4,000 footers. It's
Yeah.
big
Big
country.
mountains. Yeah.
Huh. So you said you had that buck on camera.
The year before, yeah, and I'm not much of a camera guy.
Mhm.
I had it in the truck. There was a trail crossing. I put it on there. Went back in there in the middle of the winter. My wife could have killed me. I had her, and I don't know. Cash must have been, oh boy, not very old. I would say 3 months old, 2 months old, maybe. Pulled him in on a sled. Yeah, I had a sled, strapped him in it, pulled him in it. We didn't have snowshoes. There was 2 feet of snow. You could walk on top for the most part until you
Yep.
started post holing. Yeah,
Yep.
she could have killed me. Yeah, not
Rightfully
fun.
so.
I was like,
That's
yeah, it's just a little bit
fun.
further.
Oh,
Just a little bit further.
Yeah, I've been there. That's funny. Well, on that camera topic,
Yeah.
there's a whole situation going on over in New Hampshire right now. What are your thoughts on the whole
Boy.
the
Uh-oh.
game camera
Stirring the
debacle?
pot here.
Oh, yeah.
I like stirring the pot.
Yeah, sorry if I offend anybody, but I am definitely not a fan of cellular surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's definitely got its place.
Mhm.
I will give you that. I've heard a lot of guys preach that you still got to connect the dots of killing a deer, right? I can tell you the style that we do it would not be very hard to connect those dots.
Mm-hmm.
Any given day, I mean, I could take you to 100 signpost trees in northern Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and I could put 100 cell cameras out there. And any given day, I could pick and choose what buck I wanted to track and what buck I wanted to kill. As long as I had snow, it's only a matter of time before I kill that buck. It's just a matter of time. To me, that's an unfair advantage.
Mm-hmm.
It just is, For the guy that wants to use cameras, which I'm totally cool about. I mean, I run a dozen cameras myself. Most of them are moose cameras, and every year they get big bucks on them. But to the guys that are using 80 to 100 of these things in small patches of woods chasing dumpster deer, it's definitely an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
I don't know. At some point in time, technology is, where do you draw the line?
Right.
I don't know. But I can tell you what seems ethical to me and what doesn't seem ethical.
Mhm.
And, everybody has their different take on it. Some people use it for different methods. I can tell you the method that I would use it for would be extremely lethal. I don't need it. I was killing bucks before cameras came out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yep.
pretty sure I could kill bucks
Mm-hmm.
if cameras went away.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it all comes down to how you use them and stuff, for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's a heated topic right now
It is.
amongst the Northeast community.
It sure is, I mean, and it's unfortunate. I get it as a sportsman. You don't want things taken away from you that you've had before,
Right.
previous, right?
Yep.
But it's a privilege.
Mhm.
And when privileges get abused, they get taken away. And I think that's half the reason why New Hampshire has the issues that they have, is because people weren't policing themselves, right? And when you don't police yourself, you create issues.
Mm-hmm.
And issues have to be taken care of. And I think that's what the state of New Hampshire is up against. I don't know that necessarily, but that's just my assumption.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that guys hunting the suburbs are, more against this bill that's coming out right now, but you don't see a lot of the big woods guys complaining about this bill.
If you truly hunt big woods,
Yeah.
cameras
They don't
make a shit's bit of
They
difference.
really don't. And when you, like I was telling you earlier off air, if you get a picture of a big buck in the big woods, it's too late. Most of the time.
It really is. I mean,
it's too late.
You're not going to pattern a buck in the big
No.
woods.
Absolutely.
Any
No.
given day, he could be 5 miles in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
He could be 10 miles away.
Mhm.
I mean, we see it all the time. In the true big woods,
Mm-hmm.
it don't matter.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that some of these places like southern New Hampshire don't have big woods, because there's decent sized woods. They don't have mountains. They're 2,000 footers. Those are what our hills are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are homebody deer. Those deer
Mhm.
live right there. When you get to the big woods, our deer travel.
Yeah.
Right.
They
Our
have to. Yeah.
Our deer migrate. Some
Yeah.
of these deer migrate 40 miles.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Just to survive.
Just to survive.
Yep.
You
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't see any of the big woods.
No, none of
guys
the big
going
woods
around.
guys are complaining about this stuff because, well,
It
you see,
not as
we're,
relatable to it. Yeah.
I don't like to get into it a whole lot, but if I have any issues with it is if you're using the camera to kill a deer,
Day of, you're saying.
the day of,
Yeah.
it's a little funky to me because if you wouldn't have been in there,
It definitely deters which way you're gonna go.
yeah, and that's a little. I mean, the whole Boone and Crockett fair chase thing. Like, I think there's something to be said about fair chase.
Yeah.
You know, you can't enter a buck into Boone and Crockett if it has fences around the area that it lives.
Yeah.
What if it's got houses all the way around it?
That's what I'm getting at. You know, but the houses thing's one thing, but the cell camera in a 10-acre lot,
Yeah.
that's a little weird to me. But
I mean, when you get a buck on camera and he's going into a bedding area that's 2 acres and he's only got one way out,
it's weird.
You're gonna kill it.
It's a little weird to
Gonna,
me.
you're gonna get your opportunity on it, but
Yeah.
I mean, there's different circumstances for everything, and you know, my opinion is just that it's just
Yeah, it's an opinion. Yeah, and see, we're probably our opinion's definitely different because we're big woods hunters, and you know we can't use cameras to kill deer like that. So when we hear of people using them in that manner, it's really weird to us because it seems almost like shooting one out of the window.
Yeah.
Kinda. You know, it's kind of a.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
Do you use cell cameras at all?
I don't.
You're just a straight normal camera.
Yep. And half the time, I don't mess with them. Like after November,
Yep.
you know, like I'll put a bunch of them up on signpost trees, and I'll just leave them there.
Yep.
To me,
Just
the
on
video, to me, it's more of a study project than anything.
Taking
You know,
inventory,
like a
taking
science
them,
experiment.
Yeah,
You're
you
trying to
know,
see
like
what's going on. Yeah.
Just taking a sample.
yeah, you know, and I'm not gonna kill one of those bucks probably.
Yeah.
I mean, the odds of that area getting snow and me cutting one of those tracks is pretty unlikely,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like I said, any given day, one of those bucks could be 5-10 miles away.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Just the way it works.
And I do use cell cams. I probably have like 5 of them. A bunch of them are in Vermont, and then I have some in New Hampshire. I use them for intel. They're in big woods areas, and like I said earlier, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. If I get a picture of a big buck, it's too late because I'm at work.
You're 3 hours from.
I'm 3 hours from
Yeah.
the camera. The only reason I have that camera is for intel,
Mhm.
and I have no time to check these cameras.
Yeah.
Like that's why I use them because it helps me with my scouting.
Yep.
But I will never be able to use one of these cameras to kill deer.
Yep.
And if you in the big woods, if you think you can use cell cams to kill deer, you don't know what's going on
Yeah.
because you just can't. There is no. I'll tell everybody right now. There is no magical flat halfway up a mountain that a big buck walks through every day. It's
Just
not
don't
there.
happen.
It don't happen.
Yeah.
They're different deer. They wander. They're very nomadic creatures, and
Yeah.
that's just the way it is.
Yeah,
you know?
no, it is. It's a completely different ball game, and I don't mean to offend anybody when I say this, but central and southern ground are a lot different from northern ground,
Yeah,
right? Like
for sure.
there's 2 different animals there.
Yeah.
Deer density being the biggest.
Yeah.
In all the states across New England.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a defined line. If you, I'm not going to tell you where that line is, but if you took Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, even the Adirondacks, there's a line.
Yep.
And if you put enough time into it, you know what I'm talking about. You can see that line of where there's a level of difficulty and where there's a level of not so difficulty, where there's an abundance amount of deer, where there's good deer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, I'm envious that they've got the antlers.
Same.
We
yeah.
don't have it,
Yeah.
but we got body weight.
Yeah.
You
for
know,
sure.
and we got body weight because we're hunting the northern region.
Right.
You know.
Well, you're lucky down in southern Vermont. We have neither. So
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
I lived in the worst part of the state for
Oh,
deer hunting.
you
You
have no
know what I
idea.
mean? It takes me 2 hours to get anywhere. It takes you 3 hours to get anywhere.
It's terrible.
It is.
It's terrible, man.
It is.
I just drive and drive and drive.
Yep. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what takes place in New Hampshire. You know, there's definitely guys that are abusing it. You know, there's guys that are running 80 to 100 cameras. Guys got cell phone bills that are as much as a truck payment.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think a good way to look at it is if you're using a camera as a tool or if you're using it as a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
I haven't
that
heard
is-
it put that way. That's a
If you're
good way to
using it
put
as
it.
a tool to take inventory, see what's out there. That's one thing. Which everybody, I mean, a lot of people use cameras, but if you're
Yep.
using it as a weapon to go shoot that deer, the next day, that's when things can kind of get in that gray area.
Yep.
Like
And
I
what's
said,
what's
it's all opinions. It's
It is
Yeah,
all
trying to
opinions.
understand
It is
that
all
all.
opinions, and I hate to see deer hunters at each other's
absolutely
throats per
Yeah,
se, because we need to stick together,
no doubt.
especially at this day and age. We need to definitely be a unit, but
We
we
do, and
also
there's-
need
There's a fine line there, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Accountability.
yeah, accountability is right, because these cameras, I see the other side of it where people absolutely love going to check their camera. Don't get me wrong, like I am too. I'll put them as far back as I can, and
Yep.
that's how I get my summertime exercise
Mhm.
when I'm not working, is hiking into an area and checking a camera that's been there for a month.
Something to get excited about.
Yeah, and these
Yeah.
new hunters that are experiencing and being able to see what walks by that camera, that is pretty cool to them.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I don't want to take that away from them.
No.
But there's got to be a line drawn in the sand somewhere. Where that is, I don't know. And if it's not an issue, it's not an issue. But
Personally, I believe within the next 10 years, cell cams are going to be outlawed a lot of
And it's happening
places.
out west, I believe.
yeah,
right?
It
there's
is,
a
and
lot
it-
of states that have.
It's going to happen.
Yep.
And it doesn't bother me one bit.
Yeah.
I run way more regular cameras than I do cell cameras.
Still be
Yep.
doing the same thing we're doing now.
Still doing the same thing we're doing now. I mean, and you know what? Believe it or not, for me, the cell cameras are way more stressful because I'm at work when I
Yeah.
get these big bucks on camera. And I'm pulling my hair out because it's a Wednesday and, this big old buck's walking by my camera and I'm, plumbing.
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure.
it-
I've listened to a fair amount of podcasts and talk about people and how they listen to how they find big bucks, right? And very few of them, and I don't know whether it's woodsmanship skills or maybe they just rely on technology or what, but you want to find a big buck without technology. You walk into a piece of woods and you look at the ground, right?
Mhm.
A big buck's not going to go anywhere and not leave his footprint.
Mhm.
He's just, if there's wet soil, right,
Got big
wherever
track.
that
Yep.
means, he's going to leave a big track,
Mhm.
right? That tells you that there's a mature animal in the area.
Yep.
You can tell everything you want to know from an animal's track.
Mhm.
I don't care what kind of animal it is.
Yep.
You can look at a dog. You can look at where there's a year-old lab walking, and you can look and see where there's a 10-year-old lab walking,
Mhm.
and you can see the difference between the tracks.
Mhm.
There's no difference with any other animal.
Yep.
You look at enough of them, you can figure it out. Just
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. Aside from doing cameras and stuff, how do you go about scouting like the big woods and stuff? Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Is it you just putting miles on and stuff like that?
most of it's just miles. Most of it's, I know areas that get heavily hunted and areas that don't, just from years of experience, right? And those years of experience come from just covering ground. More often than not, I am covering a piece of ground as fast as I can walk all day long until I find what I'm looking for. I've walked over more 170 to 190 pound buck tracks that probably have the biggest freaking racks on top of their head. It's just not what I'm looking for. You
Yep.
know what I mean? But if that buck steps out, you can bet he's gonna get it. you
Yeah,
know?
but you're only going to follow the big four-finger
That's
humdinger
your goal.
tracks.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. But yeah, I mean, that's a lot of it is just covering ground. With that, there's certain ground to look for,
Mhm.
right? Cuts,
Don't give away all your secrets.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean-
mountains,
Mhm.
there's things to look at, There's
Not just time in the woods, going in there and seeing those deer over the years. Putting pieces together, seeing how they're related and stuff like that.
that's exactly it. Where you found
Where
them
you gotta
before,
look.
right?
Yeah, those
They're-
bucks will teach you how to find the next one you're going to kill, or the next areas you're going to hunt.
That's exactly it. They're creatures of habit,
Yeah.
right? Like where you find these signpost trees.
Mhm.
I don't know if you know or have seen it, but it's where these doe travel.
Mhm.
That's why you see those signposts there.
Mhm.
You can go into any river bottom,
Mhm.
anywhere in New England, and you're going to find a pile of scrapes along that river.
Mhm.
I don't care where it is. You get a little bottom ground, that's where they travel. That's where those doe live.
Mhm.
That's the fastest way for those buck to check that area, is to travel that drainage. They'll swoop down through, and they'll swoop right back up on top.